Hi guys, for this group presentation, our group decided to replicate a study on increasing physical activity. Supporting literature will be presented by both Natalie and Katie. The original study will be discussed by Katie. The purpose of the research will be discussed by Natalie. The methods, participants, and settings will be presented by Megan, along with the behavioral definition. Procedure, design, intervention, modifications, measurements, data collection, IOA, and treatment integrity will be presented by Ellie. Limitations will be presented by Katie, and I, Shelby, will be presenting the data alongside our conclusion, as well as guiding the overall presentation.
I reviewed a 2017 intervention by Sadiq, Chavez, Kraft, and Friedson in spring that cited prevalence of overweight and obesity in the United States. Sedentary behaviors have emerged as an important target for health promotion and obesity and disease prevention efforts, and completing longstanding efforts to increase levels of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. Listed above on the slide are health concerns cited by this study. The effects of change in physical activity on sedentary behavior include physical activity and decreased sedentary behaviors. This reinforces the study used financial prizes and goals, coaching, and choice supports available to participants. This study implemented a randomized trial design with 2-week baseline phase and 3-week intervention phase. Participants were required to wear an accelerometer and communicated as needed with their coaches via telephone or email per preference to overcome physical activity challenges. This study concluded that the group did not relevantly increase physical activity nor decrease sedentary behavior. Participants in the increasing physical activity group, however, did increase their physical activity by 14 minutes a day and decrease sedentary behavior by 8 minutes a day. Attempting to solely decrease time spent in the sedentary time did not prove effective for improving physical activity. Increasing physical movement attempts, contrastingly, was much more successful for their study. The second article I reviewed was more concerned with individual conviction and execution of physical activity. With a knowledge base of vast negative effects of sedentary lifestyle, Mayer et al. Highlighted that even though individuals may form intentions to be active, evidence suggests that it can be difficult to translate those intentions into behavior. The intervention consisted of 4 sections of data collected in which participants were asked to complete survey forms, wear an accelerometer to measure physical movement, and respond to physical activity prompts and surveys on their phone. Experimenters found that short-term goals were still challenging to attain due to momentary intentions. Individuals may be aware and genuinely desire to reach their short-term goals, but struggle to follow through with physical activity in the moment. Data from the intervention indicated that over 75% of participants did not meet their short-term goals or minimum daily activity standards. Only 16% of participants followed through with their short-term goals to be physically active, while 84% did not engage in any physical activity. In reviewing both of these studies, we learned that we are aware of significant health risks related to inactivity, but easily overlook our own intentions to change our behavior. Increasing physical activity in regard to those 2 articles highlighted that decreasing sedentary time is not sufficient. Exerting effort to increase physical activity is beneficial, and setting short-term goals can easily be overlooked by individuals. The third article I reviewed was by Choi and Fukuoka. 2 separate groups for the study of participants were examined, the first group being a control group with no exercise partner, and the second group for the intervention that required an exercise buddy. Baseline phase involved participants wearing a Fitbit tracker for 10 hours a day while not increasing their physical activity levels. Participants were randomly assigned to their control or intervention group based on body mass index, overweight, and obesity. Control group participants were made aware of which group they were in, but intervention participants were not. Each group received an informational seminar on the benefits of physical activity, and weekly goals were determined based on their baseline data at the time of the seminar. Participants needed to reach an ultimate goal of 10,000 steps a week being 5 days, and increase steps by 20% each week. Furthermore, the intervention group was instructed to work out together once a week, use the Fitbit app to promote walking through text messages and emojis to each other, and check each other's step counts. The primary disparity between the control group and the intervention group was modeling from buddies and feedback. The intervention group increased their steps by 1,000 in the first week of the intervention. Up to the final week of the experiment, the intervention group sustained increased steps. The control group, however, demonstrated drops throughout the study that included a 1,000 step decline in the 8th week.
One of the articles I reviewed was a study conducted by Cheval, Sarrazin, and Pelletier in 2014. The authors stated that physical inactivity is defined as one of the major risk factors for global mortality. It is also estimated that 3.2 million deaths around the world are caused by a lack of physical activity. So for this reason, the authors focused on investigating if an impulsive approach toward physical activity and sedentary behaviors are helpful in determining difference in non-exercise activity thermogenesis in individuals. The study followed a reflective impulsive model, which the reflective portion of the model is a slow and effortful process comprised of evaluations of pros and cons and action plans. In this portion, the participants make decisions to activate their behaviors by setting intentions such as saying, I intend to walk 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes to improve my health. This was comparable to our goal setting intervention and conducted in our replication project. The impulsive portion of this intervention model was based on the automatic associative process acquired by the participant. An example of this may be the participant associating climbing stairs to be negative or positive based on their feelings during that physical activity. The authors of this study found that the levels of thermogenesis in participants corresponded directly to the effort and intentions made by the individuals in their everyday life. Another article reviewed was conducted by Barnegard and colleagues in 2018, and they stated that documentation proves that a high level of regular physical activity is one of the best ways to prevent heart disease. Statistics also state that a high level of regular physical activity can reduce health risks by 50% through a physically active life. This article aimed to explore whether high-level endurance training done at an early age has an influence on arterial wall properties in young women. While our study did not examine health benefits associated with physical activity, the researchers of this study found that long-term endurance training is associated with peripheral artery adaptation when sports focusing on the upper body exercise are added. Our original study that we based our project off of was titled Using Goal Setting and Feedback to Increase Weekly Running Distance. This was conducted by Watt, Crosland, and Miltenberger in 2014. The purpose of this study was to examine the effects of goal setting and performance feedback for increasing running distance among healthy adults. The participants in the study were 5 women, ages 18 to 28 years old. They were all college students and all reported to be in good health. The study followed a multiple baseline design across participants with an embedded changing criterion design. So during the intervention, participants set one long-term distance goal and short-term goals set each weekly feedback meeting. The researchers required the participants to set a goal to run at least 3 times per week and to set a higher goal for the next week. The participants had to complete at least 2 of their 3 runs at or above the set criterion level, and the most recent run recorded had to be at or above that criterion level. The authors concluded that all 5 participants increased their running distance with goal setting and feedback.
Research is ongoing as we always can seek additional information on a subject matter as well as pose new questions. Concerning an intervention to increase cardiophysical activity, it can be done in a number of different ways. Research allows us to compile studies and compare and contrast their strengths and weaknesses. Moreover, our research helped us determine the appropriateness and the best study to replicate in terms of real-life implementation. Research also provides new information about the factors that impact physical activity levels, such as mood, accountability partners, or environmental factors. Intuitively, research sheds light on the health risks associated with our particular topic of sedentary living, as well as the benefits of physical activity. Due to our study habits, general sedentary society, and individual physical inactivity, we chose to replicate a study in which our physical activity would increase. Graduate students spend hours in front of a computer without moving, and supervised hours at work behind a desk. Moreover, free time outside of work and school are also spent sitting. We replicated an intervention by Wack, Crosland, and Miltenberger that aimed to increase physical activity by setting weekly criterion goals for running each week and utilized a social accountability and support.
All right, so with the methods section, starting with the participants and settings, we had 5 women ages 22 to 28 involved in the master's level coursework at Ball State University. All the women lived in various areas of the Midwest. 4 of us lived in Indiana and 1 lived in Michigan. And all women reported good health prior to the study. This was something that was very important to be able to implement our study, because running can have a huge impact on someone's body depending on certain capabilities of the individual. So this is something that we all needed to discuss prior to starting the study. All women reported interest in improving overall health and fitness, which is something that Natalie just touched on, which is why this article was picked and replicated instead of other studies we found, because we were all working on bettering ourselves during this summer course. The treatment was implemented in an indoor gym setting as well as outdoors. 2 of us ran indoors and 3 of us ran outdoors during this time. This was done over the course of 5 weeks, and all participants ran for at least 3 days. And during this time, running was in between under or around 30 minutes for each participant. And the baseline week had around 4 instances of running behavior to help solidify the baseline data information to move forward with goal setting. Okay, so for our materials, we use an app called the Map My Run app by Under Armour. This application showed different things that we were interested in seeing while we were running, such as speed, duration, distance, and calories burned. This application was able to record outdoor runs with the geographic location tracker, which you'll see in the next slide. As well as indoor runs, we were able to manually input that information. And there was a setting in there for goal setting that can be shared with the app users. All of the participants made sure to log each run through their application. So more than 16 runs were logged for each participant. And this allowed us to see the progress through all the runs, which is something that is very important with this app. We were able to see the progress with us at all times, because it was always on our phone. So on this slide, this kind of shows you some of the things that the app was able to do. I'll start with the left and go to the right. So the first image is what you will see when you go into the app when you want to start an outdoor run. You'll click start and it'll be able to show you the duration and the distance that you've already done, as well as it'll draw a red line of where you actually were outside, which was really neat. That's in the next picture. In that next picture, you can see how it showed you the calories burned, the duration, and the different locations, as well as the time that it took for you to run. The third picture is where you can manually input your data for an indoor run. We did run into the complication that the app did not actually track your distance when you were running on a treadmill. It did track your time, but not your distance. This was something that we were able to add in afterwards after our run was done. And then the fourth image shows you an example of one of the inputs that we had had. For the behavioral definition, we defined running as a continuous movement faster than a brisk walk, which is more than 4 miles per hour. And this does not include walking that is at a speed less than 4 miles per hour, or other aerobic activities such as riding a bike, swimming, or skipping.
For this study replication, we used a multiple baseline design across participants with an embedded changing criterion to measure the effects of goal setting with each participant. During baseline, all participants were instructed to run a minimum of 3 times in 1 week. Baseline data was collected using MapMyRun. The participants were allowed to run on a treadmill or outside. During baseline, short and long-term goals were not yet determined. Before starting the intervention phase, each participant created an individual goal for week 1. The goal needed to be a greater distance than the average of all 3 runs during baseline. Additionally, each participant needed to establish a long-term goal for the duration of the study. During the intervention, each participant was required to run a minimum of 3 times per week and establish a weekly goal before the start of the following week. Weekly goals needed to be higher than the average distance ran during the previous week. The criterion for advancing the weekly goal was based on completing at least 2 runs at or above the set goal. If a participant wasn't able to advance their goal, they had the option to remain at the previous criteria level. To ensure that participants were on track to meet their goals, weekly meetings were held via Google Hangouts every Thursday evening. During the meetings, the participants provided each other with feedback and goal monitoring. Feedback was based on the comparison of goal and performance from the previous week. There were modifications from the original study during the replication. The original study featured a 2-part intervention, Intervention 1 followed by a superimposed Intervention 2. The original study did not intend on having 2 interventions, but they had participants who were consistently not meeting criteria and thus created a second intervention. Elements from Intervention 1 and 2 were combined due to time constraints associated with implementing both. The requirement to run a minimum of 3 times per week and weekly check-in meetings were pulled from Intervention 1, and the component of establishing weekly goals was pulled from Intervention 2. Before starting baseline, each participant downloaded MapMyRun on their phone or smartwatch and created an individual account. MapMyRun uses a GPS tracking feature to measure distance and duration ran. Before running, each participant started the app and initiated the running feature. Data collection began when the participant started running and ended when the participant stopped the application. All of the data for each date and distance was recorded and stored in the application. For participants who used the treadmill, data was manually input on MapMyRun because, as Megan mentioned, the app did not record distance for stagnant runs. Data collection occurred exclusively on MapMyRun for all participants. IOA was collected during each phase of the study. IOA was collected between participants to ensure that we had an accurate recording of the distance ran, as well as a correct understanding of the data displayed on the app. To assess IOA, each participant selected 1 session in every intervention phase and typed the information displayed on MapMyRun onto a document. The document was then sent to the feedback partner to compare with screenshots of the same raw data from the app. This allowed us to ensure we could pull data from the app and interpret it correctly. The data was not rounded to the nearest tenth as it was in the original study to eliminate the possibility of incorrect rounding of data collection. IOA agreement was assessed for 33.3% of the runs across all participants, and IOA agreement was 100% across all sessions and participants. To ensure that we had treatment integrity, all participants stated in writing that they were physically able to participate in the study and meet the minimum requirements for running each week. All participants agreed to only use MapMyRun for data collection and receive training on how to use the app on their phones and smartwatches prior to the beginning of the intervention.
So we did run into some limitations while we were conducting our replication project. One of those was that in the original study, the participants were given a sport kit for their materials that consisted of what they were to use throughout the entire study. The materials used were a Nike Plus sport band and a Nike Plus sensor pouch. Due to cost as well as the time constraints associated with this replication project and getting things done in time. We did not have access to those materials, so therefore we decided to use the Map My Run application on phones and or smartwatches in order to document each running session. Another limitation was due to the use of our chosen technology. Some members chose to use the Map My Run app to manually record their data if they were running indoors on a treadmill, while others used the GPS navigation version of the app while running outdoors. Environmental effects also created limitations for our participants by the weather either preventing or delaying participants from completing runs or completing longer runs that they knew that they were capable of doing. All members of the study do reside in the Midwest, so heat, storms, rain all influence completing runs, and as well as motivation to complete those runs. Some participants stated that they do not have a gym membership or access to a treadmill, therefore indoor running was not a viable option for their running sessions. If treadmill running is preferred by participants who do not have access to indoor running equipment, the results from outdoor running may not accurately portray their running abilities in terms of distance, or goals may have been set lower for their runs. Participants reported that equipment such as painful shoes may have prevented them from running more often or running longer due to foot cramps. One participant also reported that an injured ankle during data collection is something that happened, and therefore she was unable to complete a third run in her last week of data collection. And as the original study reported, we felt that this project was also limited by a lack of generalization and maintenance data. So after the study was concluded, a follow-up was not scheduled to determine if participants chose to continue running without goal setting and feedback given by the other participants. If future research is conducted on this topic, it would be helpful to know if long-term goal setting and performance feedback could result in a sustainable lifestyle change for participants.
Okay, so the results of our replication were quite similar to the original study, demonstrating generality, one of the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis. Though the results of our study were similar to the original, there were some differences in data collection. These differences include unpredictable weather, length of the study, and collection methods. This graph shows the results of all participants. Ellie was able to increase her running distance from a baseline mean of 0.52 miles per running session to a mean of 0.84 miles per running session. She completed her weekly goal 3 runs a week at criteria during week 3. She was able to reach her weekly goal at least 1 out of the 3 runs during weeks 2 and 3. During week 4, Ellie was under her weekly goal of 0.9 miles for all 3 of her runs. Natalie was able to increase her running distance from a baseline mean of 0.53 miles per running session to a mean of 1.88 miles. Natalie did not complete her weekly goal, 3 runs a week at Criterion, during the course of the study. However, she did complete at least 1 out of 3 runs at Criteria during weeks 2, 3, and 4. Megan was able to increase her running distance from a baseline mean of 1.099 miles per week per running session to a mean of 1.38 miles. Megan completed her weekly goals 3 runs a week at Criteria during weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. Katie was able to increase her running distance from a baseline mean of 0.47 miles per running session to a mean of 0.93. Katie completed her weekly goal during weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. Shelby was able to increase her running distance from a baseline mean of 0.42 miles per running session to a mean of 1.1 miles. She completed her weekly goal during weeks 2, 3, and 4. And additionally, she completed at least 1 out of the 3 runs at Criteria during week 5. This table shows all participants' weekly goals and average distance ran during the study. Ellie's weekly goals were met 50% of the time. Natalie's weekly goals were met 42% of the time. Megan's weekly goals were met 100% of the time. Katie's weekly goals were met 100% of the time, and Shelby's weekly goals were met 91% of the time. And there's a note, the averages of the distance ran is in the parentheses, and that's across all weeks of the study. This study was replicated to evaluate the effects of goal setting and performance feedback in increasing running distance through a changing criterion design. Results demonstrated that weekly goal setting and performance feedback resulted in improving running distance. A functional relationship between the independent variable, weekly goal setting, and the dependent variable, running distance, was shown across all participants. The running distance from Ellie's baseline of 0.51 miles increased at the end of the study to 0.86 miles. Natalie's baseline of 0.5 miles increased to 2.52 miles. Megan's baseline of 1.05 miles increased to 1.76 miles. Katie's baseline of 0.4 miles increased to 0.96 miles. And Shelby's baseline of 0.3 miles increased to 1.3 miles. Based on the data collected, we conclude that a combination of intervention 1 and intervention 2 was an effective implementation of the study. And then these are some references for our study. And then those are the rest.